Welcome everybody to the Global PhysEd Voxcast. I'm really excited tonight to be talking to Lynne Kenney. And Dr. Kenney, thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing?
Hey, it's my joy to be here. It's a beautiful day in Arizona.
All right, awesome. So it is what, 10 a.m. in Arizona right now?
Yeah, 9. It's 9.
It's 9 o'clock, yeah, and it's 7 o'clock here in Saudi Arabia. So I'm glad that we can make this work, and glad we could make the time difference, not an issue, and speak to each other through this awesome technology that we have.
The technology is amazing. I hear you perfectly.
Yeah, isn't that so cool? And I'm
I
like
know,
thousands of miles away.
I know.
So again, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Could you give our listeners a little bit of background about yourself? Where are you from? How did you get into education?
Sure. I'm a pediatric psychologist. I was actually born in Boston, raised in Chicago, and when I actually wanted to be a sports psychologist, Jorge.
Oh, wow.
And I got my master's in sports psychology at USC after my BA. But back then, you had to be a clinical psychologist in order to do sports psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Pepperdine and got a doctorate. And then I expanded my interest. I mean, I loved working with athletes. I had the benefit of working with Olympic athletes at USC in 1984. And I incorporate a ton of what I learned in physical education every day in my own life and in the lives of my students. But over time, I got really interested in pediatrics. So I went and fellowed in pediatrics at UCLA. And I got interested in the developmental precursors to learning and behavior, all the things that kind of lead up to how we behave well as social animals and social human beings. So after practicing for about 25 years, as a standard clinician, I started doing in-home interventions and eventually started writing books of the activities that we had developed with the kids. Everything we develop is with the kids. And then about 2013, I really started to observe that the students I had, a lot of them had ADHD and learning disabilities, and a lot of them had very poor motor coordination and beat perception. And I actually wrote Alex Domon and said, what is going on? He wrote Healing at the Speed of Sound. And he said, oh, there's this whole field of auditory neuroscience that's all about this. And I was like, well, I don't know about it because I'm a psychologist. And he shared very generously. And we now teach all over the world these whole, beat competency and body cognition activities that are short, 1 to 5 minute movement patterns and sequences that we believe engage working memory, attention, and self-control.
Wow. Okay. So there's
greatest.
That's awesome. Yeah. So there's a lot there. So let's take a step back, and I want to talk a little bit about what got you interested in sports psychology in the first place. Were you an athlete? Do you have a sports background?
I was athletic, but my family was all athletes. So the curious, honest thing, though, is that they were boys and I was a girl. And so I wasn't as athletic as they were, even though I was pretty athletic. And so they did everything, hockey, and I took them to all their events, and football, and I've been to tournaments forever. I played a little of everything. And then, okay, this is really going to date me, Jorge. In the 80s, aerobics was really popular.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, with Justine Gilman at USC, became the co-directors of the aerobics program. And that was kind of the beginning. It was kind of fun because since aerobics was so popular, Jorge, we got to train not only the Olympic athletes, but professional sport athletes. We got to meet the pole vaulters on the track at like 7:30 in the morning, people in the swimming pool. It was really a blast. And we would do, really honestly, cognitive motor movement patterns, but I didn't know that's what they were then. And that was the beginning.
That's really interesting. So what kind of sparked your interest into getting into like the neuroscience of exercise and education and, well, I guess physical education?
Well, back then in the 80s, Human Kinetics in Champaign-Urbana was already publishing really high quality content, and we were all studying it at USC.
Yeah.
Our kinesiology department also, I think that USC might have been one of the first schools aside from ASU to have a kinesiology and exercise science department. So I honestly think that it was just a requirement that we know the current literature, and I love literature. I love science. I want to do studies on this beat perception stuff currently, and I'm communicating with a few different universities, McGill, ASU, because I really would like to try to see if we teach better beat competency, that is ability to move in time on a beat in a coordinative rhythmic manner, to K to 3-year-olds, to K to third graders, are we going to see changes in their academic outcomes? And we don't know that yet. We don't have a study like that yet. We do know we engage attention, memory, and self-control. We have those studies. But this is, as I tell when I teach, you know, I'm kind of a train the trainer now, where I go interact with very intelligent, highly motivated teachers and educators and principals. And I say, you know, this is like the edge of my pinky fingernail in educational neuroscience. This is just the very, very beginning. And when we meet in 5 years again, we'll have all sorts of new studies. And some of the things I say today might not be correct. We've got to bear all this out, you know?
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit more about some of the research that's out there currently on you know, that would support, you know, kind of looking into the auditory neuroscience and how it can affect, you know, students cognitively?
Yes. Well, you know, and everyone who's watching knows that this all exists. As an example, you know that you can see in your little K to third graders and even, you know, up to seventh graders that when children are able to move in time on a beat, they do better with their motor coordination, but also in their social relationships and in their confidence. And I'm not just talking about being athletic. I'm talking about just the essential coordinative components that make you able to function well each day. They make you able to grab your backpack, you know, grab your lunch, run to the car, all these very, very basic things, right?
Right.
So there's real life applications, and then there's PE applications, and then there's music applications, and there's therapy applications, and even geriatric applications, which are becoming interesting to me. The basic, what we say generally, and you already know this, is that if you look at the physical activity research, there's no doubt, nobody's disputing that physical activity is good for you. It's good. It reduces diabetes. It reduces obesity. It does everything physical educators know. Then there's a second body of literature that says, I got too much technology here, and my wrist is ringing, my phone and my computer's ringing. So I thought I turned it all off though. Then there's the second body of literature that says, it appears that acute, moderately vigorous physical activity prior to some sort of academic or learning event does stimulate attention and memory. So Charles Hillman at University of Illinois has shown this, Chaddock has shown this, there are a bunch of people who have shown this. And basically, if you're going to take a test or you're going to have to study something that's complicated or difficult, you really do want to get your blood moving. David Sousa talks about this in his book, How the Brain Learns. So we're pretty sure about that. Then there are some other people who are more interested in embodied cognition, like myself, who say, you know what? There probably, Jorge, are specific types of patterns and sequences of motor movement that we want to do in a rhythmic coordinative manner on the beat, preferably really together, like with other human beings and entrainment and synchronization, that may even build executive function. We may even be able to build the neural highways, but we don't know yet because this is just a total new area of research. So those are basically the three different domains.
So what, so I guess the question is like, what's leading you to believe that there are these specific patterns that could help with you know, cognitive abilities?
So what we do is we take our observational skills, like all the our PE colleagues have on this podcast, and we observe who moves in time well and who doesn't. And we notice that kids who have reading trouble, math trouble, come from low stimulated enrichment environments, kids who have inattention, kids who have learning challenges, we observe that they have low beat competency and low coordination. Then we go to the literature and we find out, oh, they're actually, like there's a 2018 study on this by McDonald et al. Then we put that all together with some of the cognitive science and some of the auditory neuroscience, like Fleur Bauer and Adam Tierney and Nina Kraus, and we say, you know what? The brain relies on rhythm. The whole body actually relies on rhythm, beginning in utero, in order to kind of organize itself. And brain and body organization is very necessary as a precursor to things like patterning, sequencing, planning, which ultimately leads to being able to manage your projects in school, being able to turn in your homework on time. So we kind of we tie together our observations, and the we is me, Allie Golding, Mike Kusala, my brother Doug Kenney. You know, there's a whole bunch of us, Jill Connell, all around the world who are noticing this. And then we say, okay, let's create intervention programs. Let's test them. And then if we seem to bear out some initial positive results, let's work with some universities in order to get actually random controlled, empirical studies in order to say, one, is beat matching and coordinative movement important? But two, what kinds of kids need what dose and duration and what kinds of movements? Because one size will not fit all.
Right.
And that's gonna be like the next generation, trying to figure out what types of movements are best for what types of kids.
So do you feel like a lot of these sort of foundational skills, you mentioned Jill Connell, sort of these foundational skills are kind of lacking or missing in some of the students that we have today? Do you see that as a decline? Because again, we have all this technology, like you were saying a little while ago, you have your wristwatch ringing, you have all the alarms going off and all this stuff. And the technology is great. But at the same time, a lot of the times I feel like we're dependent on this technology to tell us when our next meal is or how our next appointment is supposed to go, right? Do you think, I guess it's a two-part question. Do you think, one, that these opportunities for young children is at a decline? And then do we depend on technology maybe a little bit too much for these things?
Well, we've had this conversation with hundreds of people, and lots of people have different viewpoints. David Sousa actually writes around page 27 to 29 in his book about how the world is different now from when it was when you and I grew up.
Yeah.
And lots of the things that we naturally were exposed to, running into the ravines. My mom would open the door, let us run into the ravine. She would say, when I ring the cowbell, come back in. We all are aware of that. Anyone who's, pretty much over 40 is aware of that. So we have tons of free play. We climbed in nature. We would hang from trees, and we needed to have good timing, as an example, if we swung from a tree and jumped into the ravine.
Yeah.
So we played hand clapping games. We did jump rope. We did jacks. A natural part of our everyday life, Jorge, was doing lots of fine motor and gross motor coordinative activities.
Right.
We didn't only do them through organized sports, and we didn't sit around watching TV and looking at digital content. So when we took all that away, rhyming is like almost disappeared. Handwriting, script has almost disappeared. Everything's way too structured, and we can't just free play anymore. So those movement opportunities that were so much a part of our early life are gone. And it's interesting because Stacy Shucraft and I spoke about, do you know Stacy Shucraft? She's fabulous. She wrote Creating the Kinesthetic Classroom. So Mike Casala and Tracy Langle wrote the Kinesthetic Classroom, and then Tracy was all about how to make one. Stacy, and she made one, et cetera, in South Carolina.
Okay.
And she was telling me just a few weeks ago, Lynn, there's so much more anxiety. I've been doing this for a long, long time. There's so much more anxiety. Well, I would like to ask you and our fellow, PE colleagues, do we think that the lack of just natural play and natural motor movement outside is contributing to more anxiety in kids? Do you think?
Oh, I absolutely think that. And this is something that we've talked about a lot, and especially in my PE circles anyway, that kids aren't being exposed to these natural consequences. And then when they are faced with some sort of challenge, they don't know how to handle it because they've never done that sort of in the wild through play. So when they don't have these opportunities, then when they're faced with those challenges in school or with their friends or during recess, it's overly emotional because they haven't had that chance to kind of be exposed to it before.
Or even just get their energy out. When you think about it, if you and I played from 2:30 or 3 o'clock after school till 7 o'clock, we were outside just running around, burning off all this energy and getting lots of motor stimulation, which is great for your vestibular system, your proprioceptive system. We were getting all this stimulation that these beautiful children are not. I mean, I forget what the statistics are, but they're spending like 5 to 9 hours a day on their digital media. And obviously we're on digital media. I'm not anti-digital media.
Right.
I just think that we have to be allowed to move more naturally in our everyday life in a more unstructured as well as structured way in order to build the cognition we need to succeed.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was reading Jonathan Haidt's new book, and he was talking about how children are anti-fragile, and basically, you know, they almost need that challenge, and they need uh, setbacks in their life, so to speak, in order to build that grit and that will that we want them to have when they're adults. And if they're never exposed to that, and you see this more and more in Dr. Peter Gray's work, right, where parents are sheltering their kids more and more and protecting them from any bad thing from happening. And if we do that, the more we do that, the less they're prepared for those bad things when they come about.
Yeah, this kind of leads us to kind of a dark area in this conversation, but my husband and I talk about how now in society we have more low incidence, high consequence events.
Yeah.
And we're constantly protecting our children from those. So it's really unfortunate. And, you know, according to the FBI statistics, this isn't a more dangerous world for our children, but it, as a mother, it sure sounds like a more dangerous world. You know, you've got to be careful when you go to the gas station. You've got to be careful, you know, always going with friends on dates. You can't meet anybody online. So it's become a very complicated world. And whenever I'm giving these workshops, I say, okay, let's end on an ascending note, meaning there are things we can really do. Like in PE, we can apply some of the new literature. We can, as an example, I just want to give you an example. It's really fascinated me, Jorge, that we tend to count in 10 in our society when our brain thinks in 4/4 time. So as an example, I was at a school in New York, and there was a PE teacher, and he was teaching kids how to hit the racket on the ball on the racket.
Yeah.
And they were trying to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so I pulled a child aside and I said, want to do an experiment? And she was like, sure. And I said, I'd like to do this experiment where we drop the ball and catch it on the racket, drop the ball and catch it, drop the ball. We're only going to do it 4 times, and we're going to count out loud. And she was like, okay, that sounds fun. So we're going 1, 2, 3, 4. You do it. 1. And she was starting to move her body in rhythm, which always happens. Yeah. So you get them on the beat and they want to move in rhythm. And then she's just going 1, 2, 3, 4. And she did drop it a few times, but the brain thinks in 4s and 8s. So like as an example, in PE, in music, we think in 4s and 8s. As we walk down the street, we walk in 4/4 times. So that's a tiny little change that's cognitive that could show that PE people were applying the new cognitive neuroscience, and their kids probably would be developing better skills faster.
Right, and that would contribute to their sort of self-esteem as well.
It's so fun.
Yeah.
Competency and mastery lead to fun, don't they? They lead you to go, hey, I'm all puffed up. I learned how to do that. In fact, I think I'll go teach my mom or my dad or my grandma today because I learned how to bounce a ball in 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah,
and you're excited. You're excited to sort of show off what you've learned as well. So I guess that kind of brings me to your play math approach. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so everything we do from Spotlight to I've got a Kinetic Classroom professional development platform to MoveBeat, which is our technology, to brain primers, which Mike and I are working on. It all kind of starts, and play math all starts with establishing a rhythm. So everything we do so the key is that we can probably build neural pathways if we take automated motor movements and layer cognition on top of them. But we only want to lay as much cognition on top as we can sufficiently keep our motor movements. So that's kind of my am I ready test. I say, okay, let's as an example, in play math, we bounce the ball back and forth, right? And then we layer math on top of it. So first we mirror count, as an example, 2, 2, 4, 4. Then we skip count, 2, 4, 6, 8. And the am I ready test is if I'm marching or bouncing the ball in a moderate rhythm. We call it quick. It's like 85 to 120 beats per minute. If I can bounce a ball, or I can clap my hands, whatever, or I can march, and I can get those math facts out of my head, I can go 2, 4, 6, 8, whatever. When I can see, the whole thing about learning and encoding and memory is that you need to put it in your brain and take it out your brain to put it in, and that's how you build the neural highways.
Right.
So if I can layer my cognition, in this case math, over automated movement, and I can do it rather quickly in time, then I know that it's encoded and possibly consolidated, or I might just be holding it on my short-term memory because I got to take a test right that day. But that's basically all of our, whether it's Play Math, which was our very first program. See, I learned everything we're talking about today in 2011 to 13 from a bunch of first to third graders with whom I was doing math at a school. And then it just exploded to doing the activities with people who have learning disabilities, doing the activities with people who have ADHD, doing the activities with low stimulated kids who, you know, can't, as an example, bounce on a beat or step on a beat. They can't jump rope because they don't know how to move on a beat.
Yeah.
So that's where it all started. So Play Math is basically everything we create is kind of a 5-step program. I don't know why, I just think in 5s. So you establish the rhythm, then you mirror count, then you skip count, then you test yourself, stuff like that. But you can use it for any subject, Latin, whatever.
So tell me about your experience in the classroom. You're saying that these concepts kind of came about through your experience in the classroom. What was that like? Were these children that were sort of struggling with math, or maybe had a misconception that they maybe were not good at math or something like that?
It's such an interesting question. So I've been working in classrooms since I started working in classrooms at Manual Arts High School in 1985, which was inner city Los Angeles. It was a magnet school. And then, although I've never had my own classroom, I've worked in lots and lots of classrooms. So then when I got to Arizona, like I just can't live without interacting with the children. And so like right now I've got 2 lab schools, and I call them our students, but really they're not my students, they're their students, and they kindly let me come play with them. So with the math stuff, what happened was there was a teacher, and she had 6-year-olds. And Sue Milano, who's a special educator, and myself, pediatric psychologist, were moms. We just went in as moms at this school because the teacher said, oh my gosh, you guys, I've got these 6-year-olds. And there's about 6 of them who are ready for multiplication, but the rest are still not ready.
No.
And so will you bring them into the library? I'll try to tell this story fast because it's a good story. So she said, will you bring them into the library and teach them multiplication? And so we went in there dutifully Tuesday and Thursday mornings with our little worksheets in the quiet little library. And the first time we did them and the kids were disengaged and I was disengaged. And the second time, Thursday, I said, you guys, are you having fun? And they were like, no. And I said, I'm not having fun either. I said, next week, meet me out behind the school. We have, behind the school, there's like these cement paths, walkways, and then there's all these fields. And they were all nervous. Will we get in trouble? And, you know, I said, no, I'll get permission from everybody. Just meet me outside. So they met me outside, and I had poly spots and hula hoops and playground balls. And we started to bounce our math, and we used blocks, and we slid, I think, what were they called? Duplo blocks, something like that.
Yeah.
We would slide our math, and we created this little Play Math program. And what's really curious is that a school of special needs kids bought all the equipment, and I went and did a training for them. And then I really didn't hear from them. And I was like, oh, you know, maybe it didn't work. Maybe you need the enthusiastic Jorge. You know, maybe you need the enthusiastic leader who kind of knows it.
Mm-hmm.
And then like a year later, I get this email. Here's the data on the kids. So they had 19 Title I kids that they did Play Math with for 1 quarter. And they identified that the kids improved their math. These are math facts, you know, your ability to do your math facts at a rate of anywhere from 50% to 250%.
Wow.
Now, it's a tiny sample, 19 kids.
Yeah.
But I had nothing to do with it. I had nothing to do with the data collection. And the teachers were just really enthusiastic because what the kids built was not only their math skills, but their confidence, just like you said.
Yeah.
So I'm a big believer in layering, especially gross motor movement, underneath cognition in order to improve everything from executive functions to confidence.
So with that layering process, do you think that, because, in Jill Connell's book, she talks about, what is it called? A moving child is a learning child.
Yeah.
She talks about having these foundational skills and your brain putting forth, energy and effort to create these foundational, to make these foundational skills automatic, right? And
Right.
once that happens, then you can think about other things. So walking, for instance, when you first start walking, you really have to concentrate about walking. You have to concentrate on putting your foot forward and moving your foot. And then at some point it becomes natural. I think she uses a really good example of driving a car. When you first started driving a car, it was so hard and you were looking everywhere and you're like, this is so complicated. How am I ever going to get this down? But now it's almost automatic, right? You can just drive a car and then you end up where you end up and you don't even know how you got there half the time, right? Because it's so automatic. But then that also opens you up to be able to think about more complex things. So with the layering process, do you have that in mind as well? Creating a foundational skill so that more complex, more abstract information can be processed by your brain?
Yeah, 100%. So exactly. So what you want to do is you want to start with a skill that you could make automatic, like walking. But it's interesting because we used to start all of our movement programs with marching, just marching. And then we identified, Jorge, that lots of kids can't march and lots of kids can't bounce just bounce on your knees. And lots of kids can't clap. They can't. And if they can clap like this, they can't clap like this.
Right.
So we identified, and I have a little graphic image of this, we identified that where we used to intervene regarding behavior, then we intervened regarding learning, then we learned 10 years ago to intervene regarding executive function. Now there are all these things: beat, tempo, rhythm, timing. And then before that, there's even visual tracking, auditory processing and perception. There's all these skills that you need that lead up to something as simple as walking to avoid something. I mean, just walking is one thing, but if you're going to walk in a door and not hit the frame, you need all these skill sets. When I was a developmental pediatric psychologist, 30 years ago, everyone had those skills intact: auditory, visual tracking, ability to walk to a beat. Somehow that's fallen away. And so we've got to reintroduce it, hopefully through play and recess and maybe beat matching activities. And then once we can move back to layering those basic fundamental skills, we would call them, then we can start putting the more advanced stuff on it. Like as an example, I got to let my dog out. She's a little suffering. Hold on.
It's no problem.
She's an explorer, my little 12-year-old blind dog, so we gotta let her out.
It's okay, no problem.
But if you're going to teach a child how to throw a ball, hit a ball, kick a ball, and they can't visually track the ball, then we've got to lay down those precursors. So that's what we're seeking. We're seeking automaticity of some of the foundational skills, and if the children don't have them, we're teaching them with joy and happiness and even making the movements their own and calling them, naming them after them and everything else.
So how important is that? How important is that joy aspect to the learning? I notice a lot of your books and a lot of the work that you do has this aspect of fun and play involved in it. How important do you think that is, rather than just repetition? It also is enjoyable.
It's the key. So I've got two sentences. Without joy, there is no learning. And the sequence is the secret. And so the sequence is the secret. And so I think that I learned from the children, and you can watch our videos. Our videos are free on my website and on YouTube. Just watch the kids moving. These children in these videos, like these cognitive motor videos, like with the beat synchronization and stuff, mixed tempo of those videos, those are children that I've known, most of them for 15 or 20 minutes. These are not my students. I do not know them well. There is one class that I saw for an entire year. I think we shot video with them about 6 times. But still, these are kids that I've probably never spent more than 2 hours with in my whole life. But what I do is I don't go in and say, I'm Dr. Kenney and I've got all these smart ideas. I never do that. I always say, my name is Dr. Lynne, and my friends and I have come up with these activities to help children think better so that learning is easier. The thing is that children like to learn much more from you than they do from me. So I'm hoping that I can do the activities with you, and then you can improve them, and then possibly even teach them. Mm-hmm. And so I take those training videos all around the world, and if I can get somebody like in China or in France to do a little movement message to my students and say, we saw your videos, we really appreciate them, I try to reinforce for the kids, everything we create is about you. And so you are the cognitive scientists, you are the creators, and then I try to reinforce that if I can, with people actually saying, she's not lying, we're in Paris or we're in wherever, and here we are watching your videos and learning so that we can improve our children's, overall well-being. So there's just nothing without joy, and there's nothing without respect, and saying to them, you've got great ideas, let's pull them out of you and make something better for other kids.
Yeah, so that's even taking it a step further. So that's also, creating this sort of student-centered approach to even the activities that you're doing, right? So making their voice heard and then sharing it, I think, is really powerful too. Mm-hmm. So do you notice that with your students that they I guess are more motivated by that?
Absolutely. They're so motivated. One thing, all sorts of activity around here. We tell them that, as I said, the children are more interested in learning from you and learning even what you created. And so you're the scientist here, and you're going to help us improve the lives of other children. And that makes them confident, and that makes them invested, and that makes them have agency. That's the word that I'm trying to look for, is that we have to give these children agency. If we go in and are only being pedagogic, is it called pedagogic? If we're only instructing and direct teaching and not pulling from them and saying, like, as an example, there's few children who are medically involved in our students, and they can't move that quickly. They can pretty much never move on a quarter note. And so I say to them, okay, listen, you're going to be the leader of all the whole notes. So in one of the videos, you'll see they're doing like heel, 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 slide, slide. They make all that up. I just tell them, you got to do something with your body, and you got to do it on a whole note. And so when the children who are having a little more difficulty know that that note is going to be for them, they're like all smiles, because this is their important time. They don't have to be like everybody else. They don't have to have the skill level of everyone else, because they're going to be able to make a difference just with the skill level that they currently have.
Right. And I think
that leads us to, sometimes when we do the trainings, people say, well, how many kids do you expect to be competent? We're just looking for like 70% basic competency for most of the class, and then we move on to a new skill. And we still celebrate the children who aren't quite catching along, but they're going to catch along. They're just going to do it more slowly.
Right, and I'm glad you brought that up too with the competence piece, because that's another thing that is talked about a lot in physical education, where they want a certain level of competence before they get to a game or some sort of activity, and they leave out the perceived competence. How important do you think that is with the children and gaining, confidence in their abilities?
Isn't it all about perceived competence, though? I mean, if you have perceived competence that you're good at something, then you're more willing to try it again, and you're more willing to seek mastery, right? So even if I can only, and I'm sure you're like this, Jorge, I can tell that we teach very similarly. Even if you can notice one tiny little kernel of skill, that's what you notice in the child, because that's what they're going to build on. They're going to build on that kernel in order to be more skillful. So that they perceive, and it's got to also be authentic. Like, I don't go anywhere pretending. My enthusiasm, when you hear me being silly on the videos, that is all completely natural enthusiasm, because I marvel at their creativity, and I marvel at the fact that they make up stuff that's so much better than our education team. It's kind of like we do the bones, and then they do the body. They do all the interesting stuff. So everything you're saying, creating self-efficacy, creating self-confidence, being authentic, giving the kids agency and then letting them feel good about what they do is so, so important. And that's why really probably in PE, we don't want to be scoring how well are you throwing a ball. We want to be scoring things like, how are you scaffolding the steps that lead up to being able to throw the ball? Because when you're doing the steps better, you're improving everything about your learning, not just your motor coordination. You're improving your reading, you're improving your math because you're learning your sequencing and patterning.
Right. And again, I think it's very powerful to give them that ability to kind of tell you where they are in their learning journey rather than us always telling them where they should be. Right. So I think that goes a long way too with again, with the self-confidence, the self-efficacy, with them being able to inform us where they are rather than the other way around. Yeah.
Christmas is a problem around my house because we've had 2 deliveries while we've been sitting on the phone. Can you hear my dog barking? That's because we're having a delivery.
He's been barking in the background.
Sorry.
That's okay. I don't mind.
So I'm interested, what do you think about all this and even more? Like as we listen, we're talking about what interests me and what I notice. I'm interested in what you notice. I mean, you've been doing this a really long time. What do you think is really important?
Well, just what we've been talking about. I mean, definitely giving the kids more ownership of their learning. I think that's what's really, that's what's been missing, I think, in a lot of programs. And I've been trying for the last, at least 6 or 7 years now to try to give the power back to the students, so to speak. And it's not just all about me. It's actually, they're the ones that are informing me where they are.
But do you think it takes getting to a certain degree of experience for it not to be all about you? Because I noticed that in the beginning, I was a little more rigid, like this is what I've been taught to teach. And then as you get older, I think you soften into who you are. It needs to be less about you and more about them because your comfort level is higher and you don't feel as nervous about the evaluation. Like when I was in graduate school, I was like, oh, I want to be a good student and I want to do a good job. So I want to do exactly what they tell me to do. And then you get more experience. It's not that you're rebellious, it's that you're calmer and you're able to kind of watch more and listen more carefully and go, oh, well, I thought this, but actually that's not what they're doing. I'm learning that they do it this way.
Right. I think it definitely takes some experience, but I also think it takes a lot of self-reflection because I know there's teachers out there that have been teaching the same lesson, for 15 years. And there is no growth. It's just, well, this works, so let's keep doing it. But I think you really, as an educator, you really have to reflect on your practice and your purpose and really be able to communicate that, right, to your students. And then part of that, I think, when you really look at what your purpose is you want these students to have agency, right? But the only way to do that is really to give them the power. So it's not about you anymore. It's not you sort of dictating where the class goes, where the learning goes. It's them informing you, right? So I think it takes a lot of self-reflection to be able to take a step back and say, you know what, this is your classroom as well. I'm part of it, and you're part of it, and we're all kind of negotiating this curriculum together.
So you know what my husband would say about that? First of all, we completely agree, 1,000,000%. But I just want to test this out with you. He sometimes says, Lynn, your way, which you just described, collaborate, work together, bring the ideas, let them build on them. He says your way works better, but it's harder.
It is harder. Teaching shouldn't be easy. I don't think it should be easy. I don't think you should be able to just sit back and let the kids do whatever they want. It is difficult. But I think it should be that way. And I think anything that's worth pursuing should be difficult. And this is something that I think is extremely important because it really shapes our world. And I take my job very, very seriously. And, I think everybody should. I think every educator out there should take it that seriously. So yeah, I think it is hard, and I think it should be.
Well, it's my honor to meet you and chat with you. And I knew from your interviews, because I listened to 2 or 3 of the interviews. I listened to Mike's interview. I listened to Dr. Ray's interview. I listened to the director of SHAPE. I think that you interviewed her. I don't know her name. Stephanie, maybe?
Yeah.
Um,
Just an
yeah,
interview here. Yeah.
yeah, all excellent interviews. And I think that the people who listen to your podcast probably agree in large part that we need to be collaborative. We have to provide agency. What I would like to add to that is we can add cognition too, and then we can justify what we're doing in PE much more easily.
Mm.
If we add, if I tell, and it's that's funny because the most common thing that people say to me when we do our workshops is, I knew this. I've been doing this for 30 years. I didn't know why I was doing it. And now I know, a little bit about why. Why do you want to teach visual tracking? Why do you want to teach auditory perception? Why do you want to teach different rhythms and different beats? Why do you want to teach kicking a ball as an example, as a 1, 2, 3? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Step back, kick, or throwing a ball. Like Spark does it. Ring, ring. Hello, it's for you. The reason you want to do all that initially is because you're layering that opportunity for automaticity by providing the verbal scaffolding.
Right.
Why do you want to count in 8s and not 10s? Because the body knows that type of rhythm. And so now you've got this scaffold on which to layer the cognition or the skill set. So I hope that's the dialogue we begin having in the next 5 years. We'll have to see.
Right. And I think what's interesting with that is that there's more to it, right? There's more to it than, it's like you said, those teachers that they come up to you and say, oh, I've been doing this for 10 years. And I knew that it was important, but now I have sort of the vocabulary to explain why, or to be able to articulate why. I think that goes back to what we were talking about before, where you have to reflect on the purpose of not only why you're doing what you're doing, but those activities that you're also introducing to the kids, right? So you're not just throwing a ball to throw a ball. There's all kinds of different things that are going into it. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I think 2 things. I think that the ability to throw a ball, kick a ball, and bounce a ball are precursors to math, reading, and spelling, and probably history, social studies, geography, et cetera, because those are 3 very basic fundamental motor movement skills after sitting, rolling over, sitting, walking, et cetera, et cetera. Obviously, there's some that come before it. But those are fundamental skills that teach you patterning and sequencing. And the literature is absolutely clear that you have to be able to pattern and sequence, and you have to understand stable order in order to do math and reading. Well, throwing a ball is stable order because you don't start with the ball up here and then go down here. So it's so that's one reason. I think that because you're teaching cognition by teaching those, you're actually teaching academics. The other thing is that I'm very interested in, and I don't know if you are, Jorge, in the social hierarchy. I work with children who are not very high on the social hierarchy, and I want to make them higher, and I want to make them feel more confident, and I want them to be able to make friends and eventually date and get married and have children. I don't want them to be in the lowest 20th percentile for the rest of their lives. And when you teach basic motor competency, knowing that it precedes cognition, which is my primary reason, but when you teach basic motor competency, you raise children's status in society. And most PE teachers are really athletic, or were really athletic. They don't know what it's like to be in the lowest 20th percentile. And that's why I and Mike are so dedicated to this beat competency, these activities that we're writing, because my hope is we can lift a few of those kids up. If we can help them move on the beat, then they can learn how to kick a ball, throw a ball, bounce a ball, whatever, stand properly in line. These are children who don't manage their space properly, even, Jorge. So I feel like, you can hear in my voice, I feel like a personal mission to help these highly underserved kids who are not only not being served academically, but they're not being served in PE either because they don't have enough basic skills, and nobody's reaching down and going, here, buddy, let's lift you up in life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Bringing how you brought up the social hierarchy, because I think a lot of the games also that we play in PE class can help kids kind of navigate through that social hierarchy as well. And when they have, I think when we frame games so that the goal of the game is to get the people around you to enjoy that activity just as much as you do, or to or we frame it so that the people that you're playing with are going to want to play with you again. I think that should be our goal rather than winning or losing. And I think that also adds to, again, the students being able to navigate through that social hierarchy that's human nature to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm. But part of this is because you personally have good social emotional awareness. And so it really, now you're saying it takes a little bit of self-reflection and inspection, et cetera. It makes more sense to me, because when you have better social emotional awareness yourself, and you're able to, as you are in this podcast, I'm noticing you're not listening to me in order to respond. You're listening to understand.
Yeah.
And this is one of my mantras this year, because I get really excited about this topic. And sometimes I just am like, listen and understand first, and then thoughtfully respond. These are social skills that even adults don't have. And PE is a great place to teach them. Hey, this isn't all just about winning. It's also about helping the kid who doesn't have the ball yet really feel a part of this as well. I completely agree. I mean, PE is a wonderful place to teach social emotional skills and teach everybody how to be what I call a good human.
Yeah, and then that also takes it back to allowing our kids to have some more time sort of unsupervised or with unstructured play, right? Because when they can make mistakes in a safe environment, then it allows them to learn from those mistakes rather than trying to always sort of not make mistakes and being guarded that way. Don't you think?
Yes, I agree. But what I would add is I think it all begins with making cultural agreements that we're going to be kind to one another, respectful, and lift one another up.
Yeah.
Because PE is a place where it's very easy to feel shamed and embarrassed. And some PE people will say, yeah, but we don't do that anymore. We don't play dodgeball to win, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, but if you're a low motor skill kid, it's still an embarrassing place to be.
Yeah.
And so we have to start, and I got to tell you, if you watch any of those videos on YouTube or on my website, I think, yeah, I won't name a child, but there's a wonderful athlete in one of those. And when I say to the whole class, we're all going to build these patterns together. We're all going to be scientists together. We're all going to improve the learning of children in other countries together. Therefore, we have to work together and lift one another up as we're doing these patterns. And you can see specifically this excellent athlete literally looking at the feet of the other people and making sure that the other kids, when he reaches up, he watches their hands to make sure they reach up as well. And I find that very moving because it was not a hard lesson for a top athlete to learn. He said, you know what? I get this. I get that I'm a star here and everybody likes me. And that actually puts me into a great position to help the other people. And
Right.
the stars aren't always helping the other people. And those stars can include everyone from the PE teacher to all the way down to the athletes. We have to be more inclusive. And by creating a culture of dignity and making that agreement first, then we can feel free to make mistakes. But I personally don't want to make a mistake where we don't have an agreement that everybody's going to be kind to each other, because I don't want to be embarrassed.
No, I think that's a great point. I just came back from a positive discipline workshop, and it was great. It was really, really amazing. And one of the activities that we did that was most eye-opening for me, a former college athlete, I had a background in competitive sports pretty much my whole life. It was real simple. It was a real simple activity where we put a line, like a ribbon, in between two people. So in between you and I, there's a ribbon. And the rules were, I couldn't talk to you, I couldn't touch you, but the way you win is you get the other person to come to your side. Right? And that's it. Those are the only three rules. Oh, and you can't move the ribbon, right? You can't move the ribbon. But I need to get you to my side. That's the way I win. You need to get me to your side. So we're both trying to win. And those are the only stipulations. And so my competitive brain automatically went to a zero-sum game. I'm going to win, you're going to lose. That automatically. And looking back at it, I was like, oh man, I don't know why I automatically went to that, even though I tell my kids all the time that we need to look for opportunities where everybody can win. I wasn't thinking that way. And it was so simple. All I had to do was cross the line to your side, and
Right.
all you had to do
Right.
was cross the line to my
That's what I
side.
saw right away.
And then we both win, right?
Mm-hmm.
Super easy. And a few people did that, but the whole time I'm sitting there stuck. Like, I'm not going to go to your side. There's no way you can make me go to your side. But all I had to do was cooperate with my partner so both of us could win. And that was a big lesson for me. We have to look for opportunities all around us in the world around us where everybody wins. And that's not a bad thing. Every competition doesn't have to be a zero-sum game. And I think that's how we need to communicate competition to our students as well. Yeah.
We could even redefine competition a little bit. That competition, like you said, isn't a zero-sum game. Sometimes competition is about being better, being a better human, being more caring, helping other people build their skills even faster than you build your own skills. Now, obviously, that's not going to be high school sports or college sports, but if we're teaching, pre-K to fifth graders, teaching them to be a healthy human first comes before everything. Beat perception, beat competency, executive function, self-regulation, everything.
And that's the thing. I always go back to Piaget's idea of games, right? And playing games, and how you want the people you play with to want to play with you again.
Right.
I mean, that's the point. That's the point of competition. That is actually what you want the outcome to be. Winning and losing is part of it, but it should be very secondary. And I know this, and I think this, and I tell my kids this. But when I was presented with that opportunity,
that task,
my mind automatically went to what I know, sort of my default. Competition.
It's normal. Yeah, that's so normal. Yeah. But it would be cool if in a certain percentage of the population we could change the default. And it doesn't mean just rolling over and showing your belly. We're not talking about that. We're talking about everybody, working in a way that can move society forward and not feel like you have to tear other people down in order to succeed. That's not what success is. Right. And that's what I really like about these social interactive, like it's funny because I've never reflected as much as today on the whole development of all this. But one of the things that came out of some of this in 2013 is something we called Spotlight. And basically it's just these dots that you project onto the wall, and they're in a 4-4 pattern. So it's 16 dots per element. And each of the dots just represents what body part you've got to use, but it doesn't tell you what you've got to do with your body. And there are 5 different things. There's right foot, left foot, hands, not clap hands, right hand, left hand, and then free move. And so it's like this ambiguous cognitive, visual, motor stimuli that as a whole class, everybody has to say, well, when we see the red spotlight, what are we going to do? When we see the blue spotlight, what are we going to do? And then they've got to really think, Jorge, because they have to do moves that will fit. Like the other day when I did this with adults, they were like, well, we can jump on the red one. And I'm like, okay, well, if we jump on the red one, up, up, that's kind of like 2 beats. So what are we going to do on the blue one? And they're like, oh yeah, that's right. So it gets all of this thinking going, and it leads to this social collaboration and cohesion. So I was interested in that body of literature, and guess what? There is an article published on how moving together in time, not necessarily on the beat, but in entrainment and synchrony. So now I'm thinking PE and what you're talking about. Come over to my side, come over to your side, whatever, kick the ball, dodgeball, whatever. All of that social cohesion opportunity leads to better behavior and more on-task behavior. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's so many parts of this. There's like become a good social human. There's get introspective and take a peek at yourself and what's your part in all of this. And then there's when we do all this together and we work well together, it leads to better academic, social, and learning outcomes as well. Just working in synchrony or entrainment.
Yeah, and I've also heard that with music as well. Like when my son used to sing for the Houston Boy Choir, and one of the things that they would talk about all the time is the research behind singing in choirs and why it's important. And it's exactly what you just said. It brings this cohesion. It brings this social interaction. Everybody singing in harmony. There's something that happens that benefits the students far more than just academically. I mean, it's emotionally, it's everything, brain development. There's something about that
Right.
being a part of this team and everybody doing the same thing, and kind of creating this safe space, right, where everybody can participate, is really powerful, and it does a lot to us developmentally.
My kids and I have a thing, and that is, and we've been doing it forever. And basically, when they say something interesting or even funny, or we say something funny about them, we say, "Oh, that should go on your T-shirt."
Yeah.
And the T-shirt that you just wrote that I really like is, "We all want to be a part of a greater good."
Yeah.
I love that T-shirt. I might make it for somebody for Christmas. Maybe you. It's a really good. We all want to be a part of a greater good.
Yeah, definitely.
We have to believe that about our children too, because we're so stuck in the 1970s, 1980s, willful noncompliance, oppositional viewpoint. Oh, they need a consequence. The literature is really clear. They don't need a consequence to get better. They need modeling and mentoring and teaching. And God, we just have such trouble getting out of that dichotomous mindset, you know?
Yeah, and I think a lot of it is because that's the way we were taught, and we kind of go back to that as our default, right? So I think, like you said, if we can create a new default, that's what we should be aiming for, and that's why we go back to education being such an important, a role of an educator being so important, especially in physical education. I always tell, in every presentation I do, I always tell the attendees that physical education is the most important subject, because we teach the whole child, and we have to take it seriously. And that's the reason why we have to create a new default. I think that's a T-shirt that I'm gonna.
So can I ask you if you could define the new default? Not that it's one thing, but what would your definition of a new default be?
A new default, man, that's a hard one.
And maybe we'll come back and talk about it.
But I think at the forefront is probably mostly about compassion, understanding that we all suffer. Everybody has some suffering going on, and being compassionate to that suffering. I think that's definitely part of it. But again, there's so much to it. That's a big question. But
this was really fun. I thought we were going to talk about PE, and we talked about life. And it was really, 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 really enjoyable. I'm going to have to reflect on all the things that I learned.
We have gone on a major tangent, but I've loved this conversation. And I'm looking at the clock right now, and we've already gone an hour. So I do want to definitely be respectful of your time. And thank you so much. This was a great.
Thank you for sitting through my sweet blind dog protecting me from Christmas deliveries. I apologize to everybody.
That's okay. That's totally fine. I'll try to edit a little bit and try to reduce maybe some of the barking, but that's totally fine. It's part of
This was absolutely so enjoyable. I just have to thank Mike Pizzala for helping me find you. I think we got introduced on Twitter. You and I have been following each other for a while, but see, the world is so busy and it's so fast paced. And I'm really trying to take the time to say, let's meet people who have shared ideas or better ideas, and let's build on them, and let's create some force multipliers, instead of everybody doing the good work all by themselves. I'm all about creating the teams that will improve the world together.
I'm right there with you.
So I'm honored to participate today.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being on the show. So if people wanted to ask you any additional questions, maybe they wanted to get in touch with you somehow, what's the best way they could do that?
Well, they can go to my website and email me if they want. Lynne Kenney, it's LYNNEKENNEY.com. They can ask me on Twitter. The Twitter comes to my phone. It's not like I'm on Twitter all day. It just comes to my phone. So if somebody asks me a question, I answer it. And then we have a Facebook, Dr. Lynne Kenney, and I post a lot of research there, et cetera, et cetera. I just started an Instagram at the behest of one of my 30-year-old teachers who said, Lynne. And so I just pretty much post pictures of my family there. But easy to find and happy to collaborate.
Awesome. So again, thank you for coming on the show. It was an really awesome conversation, very engaging for me. I hope the audience likes it as well. And I want to leave you with the last word. So if you have a final word for our audience, please feel free to do that.
I would just say, give the students a voice and let them build on your knowledge and experience so they receive personal agency, mastery, and confidence through their work with you.
Awesome. I think we could put that on a t-shirt as well. All right.
All
Well,
right.
thank you. And I hope you have an awesome day.
Okay. Good night in Saudi Arabia, Jorge.